Welcome to Show You the Money.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Show You the Money with attorneys Rob and Keith Shindler, founders of Shindler and Shindler. They're brothers, they're trial lawyers, and they're known for going head-to-head with insurance companies to get real results for injury victims across Northern Illinois. I'm Sean O'Connor, and today we're talking about truck accident cases, why they're often far more complicated than regular car crashes, and what people usually don't realize until they've already found themselves in the middle of one. Gentlemen, Rob, Keith, good to see you both.
Good to see you, Sean.
Hi, Sean.
Let's just get right into it. Why, what is it about truck accident cases that make them so much more complicated from a typical car crash?
So, Sean, great question. And we deal with many clients who've been involved in an accident, whether it's a truck versus car, or it could be a 10-car accident with 4 trucks and 6 cars. And the reason why is that there's generally a lot of injury damage sustained by our clients, so they're seriously injured, and they have large medical bills, as well as you have a myriad of potential insurance companies to go after, potential defendants to go after. You have the truck driver, you have the person that owns the truck because they're a contractor. You have the person that owns the actual trailer. We could pursue a case. We pursue a case against the person who actually loaded the trailer if we wanted to say that there was an unequal load that created an imbalance. You could have, now there's a recent Supreme Court case where the Supreme Court said now you can hook in a broker. So the actual broker that would put the shipper with the trucking company together has been able to be immune from exposure in a lot of cases. Now, within the past 2 weeks it happened, you can hook that in. So it's very important. Many insurance companies, not just Susan from down the street rear-ending their neighbor, and at the stop sign, there's one person to pursue relief from.
Yeah, just State Farm or whatever. Got it. And why do trucking companies and all those insurance carriers start responding so aggressively right after a serious crash?
Well, the interesting thing is in a car accident, when you think of a car accident, you think about car on car, right? And so you're going after one driver or the other driver, and you're basically dealing, with 2 different insurance companies. But with a truck accident, what they don't realize is that while you're sitting there wondering, should I go to the doctor? Should I not go to the doctor? How am I going to go to work? These trucking companies are on it within the first 24 hours. They have, kind of what he just touched upon. You're not dealing with just driver on driver. Now, what about the guy who loaded stuff on the back of the truck? Forget about who insures the truck or the trailer. What about some poor guy who's working for a company and loads it on the truck incorrectly, and that causes the accident in some way. So you're talking about a volume of potential defendants. You're also talking about an exorbitant type of settlement. Okay, so they're on it within 24 hours because they got to protect everybody. Most importantly, their company. So they have their lawyers, they have their supervisors who are at the insurance companies. They have CEOs are interested in it because if you get the right case in a truck accident, you could potentially, depending on the size of that company, put them out of business. And so with that fear, they're not concerned necessarily about that specific incident. They're concerned what's going to happen after that specific incident to them.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. And I'm imagining too, okay, so you've got a truck accident case. It's going to be a much more complex investigation. I'm given all the players involved. Yes.
Yes, it'll be a investigation that includes a driver's log. There's the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration has particular rules that apply to truck drivers, and so when there's trucking accidents, if there's a serious enough injury, the state patrol or whatever jurisdiction that has control of the accident may call an investigation team. Locally here, it's called MCAD, Major Crash Assistance Team, where they'll come in and they'll want to measure off how braking speed, whether there was a braking defect in the truck. And so it's much more complex because generally you have more serious injuries, and the investigation could last for hours sometimes in compiling all the data necessary.
And you're also, by the way, you're not just in an accident, as I said earlier, it's the driver. Let's look at the driver and was the driver negligent? In a trucking accident, as I said, they look at everything. They look at how long was that driver operating a vehicle, just like in an airplane, right? If you've ever been in a situation where you can't fly out that night because they find out the pilot had timed out, it's the same thing. If that truck driver has worked too long, too many hours, that's going to be the negligence on the company. They also look at things like, there's certain, you smoke marijuana, right? There's certain times where you could dissect that and detect if it go back 40 days. So if you see that guy, he takes a blood test and there's a certain drug in his system, he shouldn't have been operating a truck, even if it didn't cause the accident, that's going to put more pressure on the trucking company, which is going to hopefully make your client realize a larger settlement.
Yes, agreed.
Got it. Well, you were talking about negligence, and I'm, and the number of companies, the players involved. I'm guessing that when there's multiple companies involved, there may be shared responsibility, right, for the same accident. How do you handle that?
Well, you have to deflect, because the shared responsibility sometimes also includes finger pointing, which is not, we want to share in this liability. It's your fault. It's you didn't properly train your driver, and therefore you can't complain about the load that wasn't properly loaded that created this imbalance and caused the tipping of the truck. And so there's definitely shared responsibility, because what you'll have is insurance company A, or let's call it defendant A, has $1 million policy. And another defendant has a $2 million policy. Another defendant has a $10 million policy. So what they'll want to do is they'll want to say, we're equally responsible to a pro rata share of the total value of the case. And so even though I have the insurance company that has 10 million, that defendant, they may not want to pay their whole policy because they want the other companies to pay their full policy of 2 million or 1 million, 2 million total, to relieve them from some exposure.
And that's why it's so important. We talked about they're on it within the first 24 to 48 hours, right? So you, via your attorney, have to be on it within the first 24
hours right away.
Yeah, because the longer you wait, the more evidence they are gathering and the more evidence they are getting rid of, so to speak. And that makes it almost impossible for us to retrack our steps, right?
And then one last thing on that. The reason why it's so critical, because the insurance companies are working fast, the reason it's so important for a person that's injured or their family, assuming there's a serious injury or death, to reach out to us, is that we've had situations where we've gone to court the next day or the following day and got an order to secure the truck, to secure the vehicle from being destroyed, so that we can get an investigator in there, an engineer, to look at the mechanicals, to look at the wiring, to look at the brake pad lines, to document that before the evidence disappears.
Got it. That's good. Yeah. Hey, can you walk us through an example? Let's say a truck accident case where, the investigation uncovered something, much bigger than what first appeared at the scene. It didn't look like much, maybe, and then turns out, whoa.
Well, it's just like we talked about in your previous questions, is that, it may look just like a simple act of negligence, right? And that's going to, depending on the policy limit, depending on the injuries, that's going to allow your client to realize a certain settlement down the road. But the investigation goes far deeper into this situation than in a car accident. And so when you find out these things like the black box, right? Just like you have in an airplane, right? And you find out that certain things weren't done, it changes it. It can change that level from negligence until a greater responsibility, right? Where their duty of care wasn't where it was supposed to be, right? Under how the industry works. And that flips the whole thing. That could turn a case that's worth hundreds of thousands of dollars into millions of dollars, which is why it's so important. Look, we do this, right? We do this podcast with you, not just because we look so good together. We do this because it's if you get in that accident, right? And it could be millions of dollars, not only to make sure that you're okay, but millions of dollars to protect your future. You have to treat yourself the same way that the trucking company would treat them. Because I said earlier, it's called personal injury, but there's nothing personal about this. That trucking company's job, just like he was saying, pointing the fingers, in the end, regardless of where those fingers are pointed, their end goal is to pay you as little as possible. And so you have to dive in the deep end of the pool quickly, and that's by getting someone involved who does this every stinking day of their life.
Well, earlier one of you guys we were talking about catastrophic injuries, and I'm wondering how catastrophic injuries start changing the way a truck accident case is handled compared to, say, a car-on-car crash.
So, as far as the catastrophic in nature of these injuries that semi drivers cause on some individuals driving their kids on a family vacation, is that the inspection thing I mentioned before, because if there was a mechanical repair in the recent vintage of that accident, the driver who's driving that truck may be an owner operator with limited insurance, but I want to be able to go after additional parties for more insurance to get the compensation that our clients deserve. So I'm going to want to get that car inspected. It doesn't happen overnight. It's very difficult to get that court order, but they want to get the other company for insurance purposes wants to get that truck removed, maybe get it to a salvage yard if it's not drivable, and then in a few days, get the thing destroyed. And so that's one component of how a catastrophic injury affects the analysis and workup of a case.
And also, these are people that are working on property damage cases, wonderful, hardworking people for a smaller company, for a car on car. They're given a certain amount of authority, right? As far as what they can give. The people that generally are working for these huge insurance companies that defend these huge trucking companies, they have millions of dollars, and their job is to make sure that millions of dollars stays with them as opposed to you. Okay, yeah. Which is why when they sense the fact that this is a big injury that's not only going to just be physical therapy, but could potentially change the course of someone's life, they're going to be on you. It's going to be like, we talk about 1-847, we fight, right? See how I did that?
Yeah.
But the point is that's what you need. You need somebody who's going to fight from the first round, because if you wait to the 6th or 7th round,
evidence is gone.
The evidence is gone, and the case is over before you even step into a courthouse.
Wow. Well, I want to close this particular session with helping people understand what they misunderstand, if you will. Like, what do you find most people understand about how trucking companies and their insurers defend these cases?
John, I think that the biggest obstacle that I see to properly handling these type of cases is that some people think that they could handle the case themselves. Someone's injured and the husband says, I'm in the insurance business, I sell insurance, I can negotiate this for us. Or you've got a friend that says, I had an accident and I could handle this for you. That's the biggest mistake, because they're not properly able to evaluate, they're not properly able to value, and they're not able to properly construct the case and what's necessary. So that's the biggest thing I see, is sometimes we get a call 7 months later and says, oh, I was having my friend take care of this case for me, and now here's what happened. And sometimes it messes up the case irreparably.
A lot of balls are up in the air at the same time when you're talking about a trucking accident. Maybe that friend could handle that fender bender where you're trying to get your car fixed. But the truth is, if you're not feeling well, you go to a doctor, right? And if you need your taxes done, you go to a CPA. Well, when you have this kind of situation, you don't go, especially with a trucking accident, you don't go to your friend's cousin's next door neighbor who does DUIs. I'm sure that they're wonderful at that. You got to go to someone who's experienced.
Or gets DUIs.
Yeah, or gets DUIs. You that's what you really want. Is someone, there's so many different tentacles, okay, to a trucking accident. He just said at the very beginning of this, you could be talking about going after the owner of the truck and be limited to X amount of recovery. Well, you don't know that you could be going after someone who insures the trailer, someone who put the contents in the truck. You could have 5, 6, 7 different defendants, okay?
Yeah.
So it's important that you know that, usually with a trucking accident, not always, but it's going to result in a much more serious injury. Okay. And as much as you are going to concentrate on getting better, you need to find someone who's going to concentrate on taking care of you.
And who has experience with truck represent, and to put a bow on it, to make sure the lawyer you're hiring has experience representing seriously injured victims of truck accidents. Super important.
Sean, do I got one quick second? It's funny that, we took some time what to come up with our name for our show, right?
Yes.
It was going to be Schindler and Schindler, the ballerinas, right? Right?
Ballerettas.
Ballerettas, yes. Someone said to me, "Why did you come up with Show You the Money?" That seems like kind of you're not being your feelings are about getting the people money. Well, let me ask you something. If we don't get them money for that trucking accident, who is going to? Do you think that insurance company, personal injury? It's not personal. They're looking to not. So we're trying to do what others can't, which is make sure that the little guy, we don't have 100 lawyers with us, him and me, that the two little guys are taking care of the person who someone else is trying to take advantage of. Good?
Good.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's, I hear you loud and clear. I'm not going up against a trucking company. I want someone who can be objective and look out for my interests and, fight for things I don't know anything about. Why, it's like doing my own teeth. I'm not going to do it. So, Rob, Keith, great to see you.
Thanks, Sean.
See you next time, Sean. Thank you.
That's it for today's episode of Show You the Money. If you'd like to learn more about working with Rob and Keith Shindler, or if you just have questions about your situation, you can visit the website schindlerandschindler.com, or you can call them 847-WE-FIGHT. As always, thanks for listening. If you found this informative, leave us a review, share a link with someone in your world who might find it helpful, or you can even subscribe to the podcast. I'm Sean O'Connor. Have a great day.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.